Archaeology places the civilizations of Mohenjo-Daro, Sumer, or Egypt as the earliest in history. In fact, apart from Göbekli Tepe, which they grudgingly accept but rarely mention, science does not accept anything before about 5000 BC. We already have an irregularity here, because if Göbekli Tepe is 12,000 years old, we are left to question what occurred in the intervening 5,000 years before the official rise of civilizations occurred. In any case, we will look considerably further back in time to explain that the rise of humankind from simple agricultural states to our modern technological era would be too short a period for such a phenomenal advancement. It is difficult to imagine cavemen leaving caves and trees a few thousand years ago and creating the elegant cultures of ancient Egyptians and Greeks in a few hundred generations. Also, to have improved from ox-pulled carts to luxurious driverless cars, and from reed huts to landing on Mars in the short period of 6,000 years would indeed be a miracle. We must stress 6,000 years represents only a tiny fraction of 1% of the entire accepted age of humanity, which is roughly 200,000 years. To play devil's advocate, remarkable accelerations are not entirely unknown to evolution, but it is usually a very lengthy process. So, could unexplored factors account for these enormous leaps, such as humanity carrying traits inherited from another, much older period of civilization? If there was a highly advanced civilization before our own, could proof be hidden below the Earth? And if discoveries are ever made to that effect, will history have to make drastic revisions? It will surprise you to learn that many have already been discovered, in the form of metal artifacts encased in coal, screw threads in ancient rocks, and human-made floors and walls found in strata laid down many millions of years ago. However, they have been omitted from proper evaluation, either willfully or through ignorance, by scientists who refuse to acknowledge that our history is incomplete. They also refuse to accept a technological level beyond fire for humans that inhabited the Earth 200 millennia ago. Yet, scientists in Russia found something far older and technologically far beyond anything we have ever seen before. In 1991, scientists carried out geological studies on a riverbank in the Ural Mountains in Russia when they found something completely baffling. At depths between 10 and 40 feet, hundreds of tiny coil-shaped artifacts could be seen embedded in the soil. They range in size, with some as large as 1.18 inches. However, some were so minute they could only be seen with a microscope and measured 1/10,000th of an inch. For comparison, human hair is 1,000th of an inch. The artifacts were sent to scientists in Moscow for a more thorough examination. Spectroscopic tests were carried out with an electron microscope type JSM T330 made by the Japanese firm JEO. The results suggest the objects are mainly composed of tungsten, molybdenum, and copper. However, the story gets even stranger because the tests revealed a lot more than just the composition of the objects. They found that these tiny artifacts are not naturally occurring, are 300,000 years old, and in fact look more like modern nanotechnology components. In 1996, Dr. E.W. Matveyeva, a precious metals expert in Moscow, went even further by writing a paper that said, despite their age, they are of a technological origin, before adding, no known process can create such items. Some skeptics have claimed the mysterious spirals might be debris emitted from test rockets launched from nearby Plesetsk space station. However, this theory makes little sense, since the artifacts were found at depths of at least 10 feet and are far too old to have come from modern rockets. Particular attention should be paid to the conclusion reached by the Moscow Institute. Report number 18/485 states that the data obtained allows for an extraterrestrial technogenic origin. Therefore, these mysterious and minuscule structures suggest that either humans or non-humans were on our planet up to 300,000 years ago using or developing nanotechnology. Considering our current society has only just developed nanotechnology, it goes without saying that these artifacts have sparked an enormous debate that continues to this day. Another strange find was made in the industrial town of Donetsk, eastern Ukraine. In a coal-coking stratum 3,000 feet below the surface, miners found what appears to be a wheel, or at least the imprint of one in the sandstone roof of the tunnel they had just excavated. At least a dozen miners witnessed this event. Without removing the wheel, we can only make an educated guess at its age. Firstly, the region is located on Carboniferous rock aged between 360 to 300 million years old. Secondly, the coking coals are derived from the middle to late Carboniferous. This suggests the impossible. The wheel became stuck in the soil at least 300 million years ago. The confusion about whether this is an actual imprint of a wheel can be cleared up by looking at a process called diagenesis. This is a process by which objects are lithified into sedimentary rocks, similar to fossil remains. In other words, the wheel has literally dissolved and become fossilized. Further examination of this object has become problematic. Obtaining permission to go into such a dangerous environment would be difficult enough, and despite mine project manager Sergei Kasatkin inviting scientists for further evaluation, the mine owner was not as cooperative. Concerned that work would be halted or at least hindered, he urged the team to forget about the find and push on with their project. All we are left with is the photographic evidence. We asked an expert to examine these images. A week later, we got a reply stating, "While we cannot comment on the object itself, the photos are indeed legitimate." If the photographic evidence is legitimate, as one expert suggests, we are left to wonder how a human-made wheel could have ended up in such ancient strata. Remember, according to science, this is a time when humans had not even evolved yet. At present, the mine is closed, and the layers are already flooded, so access to the object is impossible. So this mysterious artifact remains in situ, and looks likely to stay that way for the foreseeable future. Between 1786 and 1788, extensive limestone quarrying was carried out near Aix-en, France, to rebuild the Palace of Justice. The rock strata from where the limestone blocks were taken were separated by layers of sand and clay. 1 month later, after removing 11 layers of rock, they were 40 or 50 feet below the surface. What they found beneath the 11th layer has never been fully explained. In fact, it's never even been partially explained. As the workers began to remove the sand to reach the rock beneath it, they found the remains of stone pillars made from the same stone and rock they had been excavating. They excavated further and found petrified wooden tools, hammer handles, and coins. Eventually, they came to a giant wooden board 1 inch thick and 8 feet long. It, too, had become petrified into a form of agate and broke into pieces when they tried to remove it. However, when the workers did manage to reassemble the pieces, they saw before them a quarryman's board very similar to the one they had been using. The strata in which these tools were found is 300 million years old. How did a stonemason's yard, equipped with 18th century tools, come to be found buried 50 feet deep under a layer of sand and limestone? This question is as puzzling today as it was when it was discovered. In 1889, workers in Nampa, Idaho, were drilling a well when they discovered what appeared to be a small dressed human image skillfully formed in clay. The figurine came from the 300-foot level of a well boring and dated to the Pleistocene age about 2 million years ago. G.F. Wright, a noted geologist from the Boston Society of Natural History at the time, stated, "The model is about 1.5 inches long, and extraordinary for the perfection with which it expresses the human form. It represents a female figure with lifelike lineaments that would credit the classic centers of art." Upon presenting the object to Professor F. W. Putnam, Wright wrote, "He at once directed attention to the character of the incrustations of iron upon the surface as indicative of a relic of considerable antiquity. There were patches of anhydrous red oxide of iron in protected places upon it, such as could not have been formed upon any fraudulent object. The authenticity was also confirmed by Mr. G. M. Gumming of Boston, who placed the genuineness of the discovery beyond a reasonable doubt. In 1979, Professor Albert A. Wright of Oberlin College explained the figurine and its authenticity. It was not the product of a novice, but was made by a true artist. Though in bad condition, the doll's appearance is still distinct. It has a bulbous head, mouth and eyes, big arms and long legs. There are also faint geometric markings on the figure which denote either clothing, designs, or jewelry. The doll is the model of a person of a high civilization, artistically dressed. Since 1975, the area has been considered the world's richest collection of pre-Ice Age plant and animal fossils in North America. Notably, paleontologists have found the greatest collection of fossils of the American zebra, which became extinct about 10,000 years ago. Both then and now, scientists believe that the authenticity of the Nampa figurine is impossible. It flies in the face of commonly accepted timelines. Humans had not even evolved on this planet 2 million years ago, so who created or left this artifact in Earth's distant past? Alas, most of these discoveries have vanished or are purchased by collectors who won't allow them to be tested. And most damaging of all, most of these artifacts were taken from their place of discovery before valid scientific analyses and measurements could be performed. The findings are, therefore, seen as erroneous by the archaeological community. Nevertheless, the future promises more discoveries to come, discoveries we hope will be handled according to existing scientific standards. Suppose we approach anthropology with a mind open to the likelihood that humanity may be much more ancient than science holds. In that case, we will merely be detaching ourselves from the prejudices of the Middle Ages, which can only be a good thing. The big question is, was Earth home to a technologically advanced society at a time in the very distant past? If we accept that there was one, we may learn from the past, and humanity might avoid the mistakes of this vanished race. Our civilization will then find its proper place on this beautiful planet, its true mission, and work towards a more glorious future.